I'm back in the UK and the weather is pants. So what do I need? A new indoor quad. This is the Eachine QX65. Let's take a look. So into us from Banggood is the QX65, and I have really missed brushed little micro quads. The last one that I really loved was the QX100, I think it was called, or the Q100C, I can't quite remember, and it was brilliant. So it'll be interesting to see how this little tiny whoop replica lives up to it. Now this one's available in 3 different packages, the basic, the standard and the advanced. Now I think I've got the advanced here, which comes in at around £65 or $70. And the difference really is what you get in the box. The advanced one comes with a load of batteries, also a multi-charger as well. You can see I've got the advanced one here, and there are different receiver options as well. So there are quite a few different combinations. Click on the link in the video description to have a look at them all. But this is basically the deluxe one. This is the best that it gets, where you essentially get everything that you need to keep this thing flying and also to give you lots of flight time. So let's have a quick look at what we've got in the box. First of all, we've got a single USB charger there, which is just for charging a single battery individually. Now this is quite nice about the advanced version. We've then got this multi-charging unit, which you can plug in all 6 batteries that you get with the quad. We've even got a nice little display on there. Also there's an input for an XT60, so you can actually charge this from another bigger battery. There's even a USB on this, so you can plug this into a mobile phone charger to power it and charge all of your batteries. Well, the little switches by every output is actually to switch between regular voltage or high voltage. So if you've got a regular LiPo, you've got the 4.2 option on one side of the micro switch. On the other side is the high voltage option, which gives you 435. So you must make sure you set those correctly. You don't want to overcharge a regular LiPo. Of course, it won't do any harm for a high voltage LiPo. So that's quite cool. It's a lovely little unit that you only get with the advanced version, but definitely worthwhile. Now, of course, we've got our batteries, and as I mentioned, you get 6 with this one. So they are tiny little batteries. They're 250 milliwatts and they're only 1S, but they are high voltage batteries. They're not your traditional lithium polymers. So I think you get a nominal voltage of 4.35 volts instead of 4.2. And you get 6 of those with this advanced package. So loads of flying available there. Also, with the accessories, you get 2 different covers. So if you're flying with lots of other people, you can color code your quad accordingly. And you get 2 sets of spare props as well. So if you are unlucky and you damage these or they fly off, then at least you've got spares. But it's worth noting that this quad has prop guards. It is a tiny whoop replica. And look, with this advanced version, you get 2 spare shells as well. I mean, you can almost build a whole new quad here if you've got the internals as well. But loads of accessories. I don't know, another little bit of plastic there, not sure what that's for. A screwdriver, and what else? Some screws as well. And finally, we get to the quad. And there it is. So, advanced version. Oh, look, there's another battery. So you actually get 7 batteries in total with the advanced version. And bearing in mind that this package only costs £65, so that seems really cheap. Right, let's have a look in more detail at the quad itself. Now I do like my micro quads, and this one is super cute. As mentioned, it is a tiny whoop replica, and so of course people are going to be used to the look and feel of this, but it's really nicely made. So first of all, the actual case and the body of this quad is made of ABS plastic, and can you believe this? It weighs just 26 grams with the battery. It actually only weighs 20 grams without it. It is a 65 size class quad, and so it is ridiculously tiny. The motors we've got here are brushed motors, but they are cordless, so you get a little bit more power. They are 0.615, so absolutely tiny. It would have been nice, I think, if the advanced package threw in a couple of spares, because what's quite nice about these is that looking at the underside, the motors are hot swappable. They're plugged into the flight controller, not soldered. And on a quad of this scale, that's really nice to see, because certainly they'd normally be soldering them direct to save cost, and also of course weight, because those plugs do carry a tiny bit of weight on something as minuscule as a 20-gram quad. Attached to those motors are these tiny little 31mm props, and they are 3-bladed, and as mentioned you get some spares of those as well. And what's lovely is that they are shrouded by these nice prop guards, so you can bounce this thing all over the house. On the front we've got this lovely little camera. It's a 700 TVL camera, and the lens on there gives you an FOV of 130 degrees, which is quite wide, but on something this small it should work quite well because you're meant to be flying it indoors. Attached to that camera is a 48 channel 25mm VTX, and you can see the little whip antenna coming out of the top. Now normally on these micro quads the whip antennas are very vulnerable. If you crash you can normally damage these quite easily, and they can be a real pain to solder replacements, but this one is very rigid, feels nice and protected, and that's really good to see. The camera, I should also add, is a CMOS camera, not a CCD camera, but you can't really expect that on something this cheap. Inside, we can't really see it. You can get a glimpse of it through the sides of this quad, but there is an Eachine B-Core flight controller in there. That's an F3 board, and it's the version 2. Also comes with an on-screen display built into it, and of course that's powered up as well by the BetaFlight implementation on there. It comes with 3.2.2. Now apparently there are 4 LEDs on here. I'm not sure where they are, so I'm just going to quickly plug in that battery very carefully. And there you go. So we've got LEDs on each corner. We've got white at the front and red at the back. And also, of course, you've got the nice little lights from the flight controller and the VTX inside. This one also has an FrSky receiver built in inside. And I think that's what we can just see there. And I can just about see a bind button if I look very closely in there as well. And we'll get on to binding it next. But what a beautifully cute little quadcopter. Looking forward to flying this one. I've missed flying indoors, but being back in the UK right now, the weather is utterly and so I don't really have a lot of choice. So all in all, if you look at everything you get here, that's £65. Absolutely nothing for a quadcopter that essentially is ready to go just by adding your transmitter. Very excited to fly this. Let's get on to the binding with the transmitter and have a quick look in BetaFlight before we rampage this through my house. Look out, family. So now to get this quad bound to our FrSky Taranis transmitter, and the first thing we need to do is get to the onboard receiver and then put it into bind mode. First of all, remove the cover, and it's secured by 3 tiny little screws, so remove those first. It's very easy to forget the tiny screw at the back, so be sure to undo that one as well. Now this next bit can be a bit fiddly and you may need a spare set of hands, but prepare the battery for connection and then hold the tiny bind button whilst plugging the battery in fully. You'll know if you've done this right because the white lights on the quad will remain solid. We'll now set up the transmitter, and the first step is to of course create a new model. We're going to use the setup wizard to create a new quadcopter profile, and then we'll give it a name of QX65. Now onto the mixers page, where we'll be configuring 2 additional channels for our auxiliary controls. We're going to be adding 2, one for our mode switch and the second for our arm and disarm switch. This model does not have a buzzer, unfortunately, and so we won't be configuring our usual 3 auxiliary channels. Finally, we'll set the RF protocol to D8 because the inbuilt receiver won't bind to D16, and then we need to get our cursor ready on the bind option. So with the quadcopter in bind mode, we hit bind on the transmitter and the white lights on the quad will all turn off shortly after, and that confirms that the binding was successful. We can now turn off the transmitter and the quad, and then it's finally time to get into BetaFlight for a quick look at the configuration. Let's get it now configured in BetaFlight, and the first thing that we'll check is the accelerometer, which doesn't need a calibration, and so we're going to leave that as it is. Next, onto the ports tab, and we can see that the inbuilt FrSky receiver is set up on UART 3. Onto the configuration tab, and the receiver is set up as S-Bus for us from the factory, and so no changes needed there. The motor protocol obviously is set to brushed, and motor stop is set to on, but I'm going to toggle that to off. It's down to personal preference really. The gyro and PID loops are running nice and fast on this flight controller, and we're going to add a custom craft name because we can. We'll hit save and reboot to store our settings, and then we'll reconnect. Looking at the power and battery tab, and the minimum cell voltages are set below 3 volts, which is a little bit dodgy. I'm going to leave them as they are, but I would recommend increasing these above 3 volts. The PIDs will leave at stock and they appear to be the BetaFlight defaults anyway, so there might be an opportunity for tuning here. On the receiver tab, we can see that our binding was successful by playing with the gimbals on the transmitter, and the channel map is already set to TAER. Really nice to see a quad configured correctly from the factory. The endpoints and midpoints, however, are quite off. You can follow our guide for instructions on how to correct that quite easily using the RX range command. Now the modes tab, and there are just 3 configured from the factory, but that's not enough for me. We'll add horizon and then reassign our modes accordingly based on the auxiliary switches that we configured earlier on the mixer tab of our Taranis. I'll also add anti-gravity and configure that for horizon and rate mode as well. Plus, I'm going to set air mode to the correct auxiliary switch and set that for these 2 flight modes as well. Finally, we'll click save to store that configuration and we're all done. Now, it's really impressive to see an inbuilt on-screen display on a quad this small, but this has one and it just needs a tiny bit of reconfiguration to clean up the layout. Click save and then that's finished, except for finally to confirm the BetaFlight version that it ships with, 3.2.2, so that's fairly recent. In part 2, we'll be flight testing the brilliant QX65, so be sure to hit that subscribe button now to get a notification of when it's live. Links to the QX65 are in the video description. Be sure to comment below with your thoughts and of course click that thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Part 2 will be live in the next few days. Thank you very much for watching.